In 1950, Dr. Abraham Jacob Weintraub left France for Sri Lanka and India with the intention of staying only 2 months to meet with spiritual masters, in particular with Ramana Maharishi and Sri Aurobindo. As fate would have it, he met Ma Anandamayi soon after his arrival. Following this meeting, he decided to follow the holy woman and later became a monk or Swami in Ma's organization, taking the name of Swami Vijayananda, the victory of bliss. Swami Vijayananda never returned to France and spent nearly 60 years in India, including 17 years as a hermit in the mountains of the Himalayas. This gentil grand-père, or sweet grandfather, as some French followers like to call him, welcomed Westerners to Ma's ashram in Kankhal, where the tomb of Anandamayi Ma is located, until his death on April 5, 2010, at the age of 95. Today, Swami Vijayananda is an object of veneration for Christians, Jews, Buddhists, Hindus, and others at his grave in Père Lachaise, serving as a bridge between East and West, as well as a central element to the worship of Anandamayi Ma. Just imagine that a tree, a beautiful, strong old beech, for instance, approaches you with calm steps. What would you feel? Oh, I have gone crazy, you would think. Or perhaps I am dreaming. You would wonder. Finally, when you realize that you are neither dreaming nor are you seeing an illusion, you will understand you have entered a new dimension of reality. This is how the German novelist Melita Marschma described her first encounter with Anandamayi Ma in her book Encountering Bliss, My Journey Through India with Anandamayi Ma. Ma Anandamayi is considered a true giant in Indian spirituality, who is revered by people in the East and the West alike as one among the great saints of modern India, along with saints like Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, Aurobindo Ghosh, Ramana Maharishi, and Paramahansa Yogananda. Anandamayi Ma literally means bliss-permeated mother. It was as early as 1920s that people close to her began to realize the essence of Mother Divine in her and started calling her Mataji, or often just Ma. It was one of her early disciples called Bhaiyaji who gave her the title of Ma Anandamayi, meaning Mother full of bliss. Soon people all over the country and from different quarters of the world who flocked to her for spiritual illumination started calling her Anandamayi Ma, or bliss-permeated mother. On April 30, 1896, in a remote rural village of Kyora in East Bengal, a girl child was born to a poor but devout Vaishnava Brahmin couple. They named her Nirmala Sundari, meaning immaculate beauty or taintless beauty. According to Professor Bithika Mukherjee, the principal biographer of Anandamayi Ma, she was a very detached child right from her early years, showing little interest in her surrounding environment. People often thought she was intellectually challenged, but this detachment did not mean any withdrawal from life. Nirmala Sundari was indeed a very happy child. She communed with animals and trees, like Saint Francis of Assisi, and often fell into spiritual trances. At the age of 13, Nirmala Sundari was married to a much older person, Ramani Mohan Chakravarti. He later became her disciple, and she called him Bholenath, one of the names of Lord Shiva. Ma went through her marriage life with complete commitment, treating her husband like a devoted wife, but she never consummated her marriage with sexual union or procreation. It is said that whenever the thoughts of physical attraction and lust occurred to her husband, Ma's body would assume the terrible and awe-inspiring form of the goddess Kali, and the poor husband would retreat in submission and guilt. Bholenath was troubled and frustrated at first, but was gradually convinced that his wife was in fact a manifestation of the Divine Mother. He later took spiritual initiation from his wife and began to relate to her as his guru. In a remarkable reversal from the perspective of Dharma Shastra or the Hindu code, he spent the rest of his life as his wife's disciple, caring for her physical well-being as she seemed completely uninterested in her body, and mediating between her and her growing number of devotees. Ma, in fact, distanced herself from the traditional role of a Hindu married woman and broke the ideal of the perfect Hindu woman, or pativrata, by her refusal to toe the line. Karen Pekalis, who undertook an interesting study on the female gurus in Asia, considers this refusal of the socially defined role of a woman as a key instrumental element in conferring the charismatic status Ma Anandamayi held among other female saints and gurus. In 1918, at the age of 22, Ma moved with her husband to Bajatpur in eastern Bengal. There, she initiated an intense and prolonged phase of spiritual self-discipline or sadhana. Unlike other sages and yogic masters, she never received any direction or lessons from a guru. She taught herself and was able to perform the varied yogic postures, asanas, and symbolic and ritualistic gestures, mudras, all by herself, spontaneously. Ma called this phase sadhana leela. Leela means play or game. For Ma, there was nothing to be attained spiritually through sadhana, although she learned, practiced, and perfected it without any masters. Her state had always been one of spiritual realization, according to Ma. Like the famous Sanskrit scholar and theologian, Professor Gopinath Kaviraj, whose writings were instrumental in exposing the spiritual power of this illiterate woman to the academic world, observed, "Samadhi or no samadhi, she is where she always has been. She knows no change, no modification, no alteration. She is always poised in the self-same awareness as a supreme and integral universality." Anandamayi Ma continued her sadhana or self-disciplining, and that eventually led into her initiation. On August 3rd, 1922, Ma conducted her own initiation, simultaneously becoming the disciple, Shishya, the master, Guru, and the divinity, Ishtha. All the intricate rituals as laid down in the scriptures were spontaneously performed by her to detail. Later, Ma said on her initiation, "As the master, Guru, I revealed the mantra. As a disciple, Shishya, I accepted it and started to recite it. The mantra now replaced the names of God, which I had been repeating earlier. As the realization dawned within me that the master, the mantra, the Lord Ishtha, and the disciple are one. By this unconventional act of self-initiation, Anandamayi Ma distinguished herself from most of the gurus and sages and became an exceptional saint." In 1924, Anandamayi Ma moved to Dhaka, the capital city of Bangladesh, with her husband. It is during this period that people started recognizing her spiritual mastery, and the first disciples flocked to her, including Bhaiyaji, who first called her Ma Anandamayi, describing her as the mother saturated with joy. Slowly but steadily, the number of people who recognized her spiritual prowess increased, and people far and wide began to hear about her spiritual ecstasies and started coming to meet her and seek spiritual counsel. Many saw her as an incarnation of the Divine Mother. Others saw her as a being that had attained the perfect realization, Jivan Mukta. A good number of people flocked to her, hearing of her reputation, and wanted to see her perform miracles, clairvoyance, and healing. From the early 1930s onwards, Ma started traveling throughout the country, visiting temples and holy sites, and meeting with her devotees. Her life became an unending procession of religious gatherings, satsangs. For the rest of her mundane life, Ma followed this pattern of traveling and meeting, leading the life of a renunciant and a spiritual guru to her followers. She interacted with strange crowds as a spiritual guide and spoke about spiritual matters with authority, all the while referring to herself as a little girl. Her fame spread slowly but steadily, and many scholars and sages wanted to know about her and came to meet her. To their surprise, she spoke to them with ease and authority about even the most complex philosophical concepts. They could instantly recognize the higher state of spiritual elevation this illiterate girl had attained. During the next few years, many prominent people, Bengalis and non-Bengalis alike, had the opportunity to meet Ma and become her devotees. In 1933, Kamala Nehru, wife of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, met Ma and became her devotee. Kamala's daughter, Indira Gandhi, future Prime Minister of India, would come to seek Ma's spiritual guidance throughout her life. Other well-known Indian devotees who met Ma during this period included the saint Sivananda, the yogi Yogananda, and Mahatma Gandhi, as well as numerous politicians, including the President of the Republic, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, and the Vice President and philosopher Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, and Pandit Nehru. Within the ensuing decades, many European visitors to India had Ma's darshan and became her devotees. Ma's foremost foreign devotees include Abraham Jacob Weintraub, a French physician, now Swami Vijayananda, British photographer Richard Lanoy, and the French film producer Arnaud Dujardin. In her pilgrimages throughout India, Ma attracted a vast number of followers, and although she never encouraged it, ashrams were constructed to welcome her. An organization was created in 1952, the Shri Anandamayi Sangha, making Ma the first woman in the history of India to be represented by a movement of such size. While on a visit to India in 1936, Guru Paramahansa Yogananda, the founder of Self-Realization Fellowship in America and the world-renowned teacher of Kriya Yoga, went to meet Anandamayi Ma, as suggested by his niece. The moment Ma saw him, she got down from the car she had got in as she was about to go on a journey and walked up to him, saying aloud in childlike joy, "Father, finally you have come." Guru Yogananda was surprised by this, as he was meeting her for the first time. Sometime later, at his request, Ma visited him in his school in Ranchi. In his book, Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda describes how Ma responded when asked to tell something about herself. "There is so little to tell, Father. Before I came on this earth, Father, I was the same. As a little girl, I was the same. I grew into womanhood, but still I was the same. Even afterwards, through the dance of creation, changes around me in the hall of eternity, I shall be the same." Fully convinced of Ma's divinity, Yogananda remarked that Anandamayi Ma was always one with the eternal. In the last decade of her life, Anandamayi Ma's devotees numbered in the hundreds of thousands, and ashrams, hospitals, and schools had been established in her name all over India. At the age of 86, on August 28, 1982, Ma took Maha Samadhi, or passed from the physical world, in her ashram in Dehradun. Next day, in accordance with Ma's wishes, her body was taken in a procession tended by thousands in mourning to Kankhal Ashram in Haridwar. On Sunday, August 29, Ma Anandamayi was buried as a realized being, and ever since, her shrine has become a place of worship and pilgrimage, renowned for its spiritual power. Her ashrams continue to function in honor of her, headed by various male renouncers or sannyasins, and run largely by celibate women or brahmacharins. Her thousands of household devotees worship her daily in their homes and gather each week to participate in spiritual practices in her name. Ma Anandamayi's life and teachings do not yield to easy categorization and labels. Various disciples, scholars and observers of her life and work have wondered if Ma was just an extraordinary mystic or an avatara, or is she in fact the absolute self in bodily manifestation? In the words of her Italian devotee, Miriam Orr, Mother is not a human being like all the others. She is divine light clad in a human form. Alexander Lipsky, in his book on Ma, makes a curious observation that though many a skilled photographer has tried to capture Anandamayi Ma, most of the pictures had turned out to be very distinctly different. Lipsky likes to conclude that we are witnessing in her person the infinitely varying aspects of the cosmos. The spiritual teachings of Anandamayi Ma likewise defy labels and cannot be said to belong to any particular school of Indian philosophy. Anandamayi Ma never thought of herself as a guru and constantly called herself this little girl. But at the same time, she gave spiritual counseling and instructions. Her method of teaching was simple. She chose a simple language and spoke often through parables, like Sri Ramakrishna did, or like Jesus Christ. According to Ma, irrespective of which religious path one embraces, the aim of religion must be to pierce through the veil of delusion to discover the underlying oneness and ultimately to merge with the One. This is the foremost, nay the only duty of man. We may try to summarize the teachings of Anandamayi Ma as focusing on two central themes, on self-realization and on action. She often reiterated that the supreme calling of every person is to try and achieve self-realization, and that all other obligations in life are secondary. The true goal of our life on this earth is to realize God by knowing oneself. Hence, the actions that we do in our daily lives should be those which help us realize our divine nature. Ma constantly spoke of the quest of finding our true self as our only possible way to escape from samsara and karma, the endless cycles of rebirth in this world of illusory reality. It is clear that even as she did not subscribe to any particular school, her teachings corresponded to the philosophy of non-duality. Her teachings essentially followed the path of Shankara's monist tradition of Advaita. Ma always spoke of herself in the third person, calling herself as this body or this little girl, an indication of the non-dual thought she practiced. Anandam, or bliss, is a highly philosophical idea in Indian tradition. God, or the Absolute, is described as Sachitanand, a fusion of existence, consciousness, and bliss. Thus, in Indian philosophical tradition, bliss is not just joy or happiness. It is the ultimate manifestation of God Himself. This is the reason why Anandamayi Ma, the bliss-permeated mother, was considered to be the manifestation of the Divine Mother by her disciples. The bliss Ma propagated and emanated was the higher state of self-realization, attainable by everyone through proper sadhana and proper living. The life of the blissful mother is an eloquent testimony to the abiding strength of Indian spirituality. Ma Anandamayi's message is particularly appropriate in a world where the notion of progress is no longer taken from gospel truth, and the whole array of our modern values is undergoing an agonizing reappraisal. Anandamayi Ma's diagnosis, the present disease of civilization, as over-secularization. She suggests that the cure from our severe illness cannot be brought about by engineers, sociologists and psychologists, but by doctors of the soul. She prescribed a drastic revolution in our views and attitudes from outwardness to inwardness, from materialism to spirituality, and from man-centeredness to God-centeredness, observes Alexander Lipsky. Anandamayi Ma is now generally regarded as the very incarnation of bliss, a supreme manifestation of the Divine Mother. She continues to teach and guide thousands of her followers even today. The supreme lesson of bliss she taught by example lives on. Where bliss reigns, fear must vanish, says Alexander Lipsky of Ma's legacy. Ma Anandamayi was the embodiment of the truth proclaimed by Taittiriya Upanishad. From joy springs the universe. Ma's presence is external in this world. In her own words, one who passes away, in fact merges into the one who is ever existent. Anandamayi Ma, the mother of bliss, is indeed ever existent.